Dante, I want to thank you for joining me for this episode of Spolitics. I start every episode the same way, and that is with this question to the guest, and that is name a athlete or a moment that made you love sports.
Ugh, Jerry Rice. I grew up in Sacramento, California, and my first memory of watching any NFL game was the Super Bowl. I think it was in '88, where the 49ers were playing the Bengals. And Jerry didn't score the game-winning touchdown. John Taylor did, but Jerry Rice was just consistent, and he was brutal in that fourth quarter against the Bengals, and he and Montana really pushed him down there, and John Taylor finished the deal. But Jerry Rice was always my absolute favorite player, but I had a few others, but that specific player, that specific moment, Jerry Rice in the Super Bowl against the Bengals, that was big for me.
Well, as a 49er fan, I'm not mad. So I do appreciate that. Well,
Yes.
well, given that, that memory stands out for you, somebody who is, I don't think just one of the greatest wide receiver, but one of the greatest football players, period. Was wide receiver always the position you wanted to play?
Jamel, I grew up playing both cornerback and wide receiver. And I remember specifically the moment when I knew that I was going to be a wide receiver was I loved the NFL. I was that kid that could tell you the roster of every team, every coach, every offense that was run, the statistics, all of that. I was that kid growing up. Cornerback was my favorite position. Charles Woodson, Deion Sanders, those guys. I thought I was Charles Woodson in high school when he was at Michigan, right? So another one of your squads. So
No, no, no.
well, actually, no, you're
Mich-
Michigan State.
you're
My
right. I was
bad,
like,
my
hold
bad.
up
No,
now.
Michigan State,
Hold
right?
up.
My bad, my
Listen,
bad.
you was about to get
My
jumped
bad.
virtually.
Right, right. I thought about that. The brain was like, wait, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. Uh, but yeah, Woodson was my guy. And so corner was my favorite position. And I always told myself, yes, I want the ball in my hands, but one, I can either do punt return or kick return, but also determining how good I was as a defender, I can make my own plays and get interceptions and things like that. So, but the moment that I realized that I needed to be a wide receiver was watching Randy Moss and thinking back to all the things that Jerry Rice was doing when I was a kid, and even when I got to college, watching Jerry Rice and thinking about, I don't want to cover those guys. I want to run with those guys. Like I don't want to have to cover those dudes. So I always knew I was fast, and I always knew that speed was going to be something that I had in my toolbox. And so, what better position to play with speed than wide receiver? And I love wide receiver, but corner was always, and even still today, is one of my one is my number one. That's my heart, cornerback.
Now that is surprising to hear because I consider corner. I don't know if I could say it's the toughest position in football, but it's certainly the most humbling because
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And so when you, as you said, you didn't want to cover Randy Moss and Jerry Rice. You wanted to be them because at some point, even the best corners they're going to make probably look a little bit foolish.
Yeah.
Um, Now you're wearing the Tennessee orange very proudly here.
Yes.
Now, so much has changed about college football since you played. Mostly having NIL, having college athletes now being able to make money. Recently settled this lawsuit where the college teams are essentially going to be able to pay players directly. From what you've seen, as somebody who's remained close to the program that you've gone through, um, where do you stand in terms of there are a lot of people who still feel like NIL is destroying college sports and destroying college football in particular. Like, where do you stand about how the NIL era has sort of complicated things for the way college football is run?
Yeah, Jamel, I kind of look at it from a different perspective. I look at it from the perspective of the system of exploitation was destroying college football. And so in society, in any situation you see where there's a big pendulum swing to one side, that pendulum usually, in some cases, can swing back further the other way, right? And by that I mean the NCAA had us on a strict schedule as far as I remember it was during the summer, Jamel. We didn't even have 3 meals a day. We weren't allowed 3 meals a day during the summertime. We were given like a stipend basically for the day, but that was supposed to cover, I believe it was supposed to cover two of the 3 meals, and it was like $18, $20. Now, granted, this is back in the Ice Age, in the late '90s and the early 2000s, but still, like, these are kids that you are making hundreds of millions of dollars off of, and you're expecting them to perform at an optimal level, and you're going to give them the minimal amount of money to be able to survive and to thrive, really, because that's what we do best as or as collegiate athletes, as big time athletes. You need your fuel, you need your rest, your workouts, all those things, right? So the pendulum has swung back so far to where the NIL is just kind of like a wild west free for all. Um, I'm honestly not mad at that because I'm like, you guys should have figured it out before it got to this point. So now you need to figure it out, and not in a way that's going to hurt the players, which I'm not expecting them to do that. I'm not expecting them to side with the players, but I'm looking at it from the perspective of I'm okay with the NIL right now, even though I wish they would have had it when I was playing. But I'm definitely not mad at the kids today, at the young athletes today. I'm happy for them, and I'm glad that I was a part of the system that kind of helped turn the tide on that, right? And I think, not to veer too much off, but I think the Ed O'Bannon case really brought to light for college players what the capacity was for earning potential, for college athletes in college when he did that lawsuit, against the NCAA. I think it was against EA Sports
Yep.
for having their name, image, and likeness on these games, but not getting paid for it. So today, these college athletes, I think, are more well in tuned to the financials of what's happening. Obviously, there's more information with the explosion of the internet and the everyday 24/7 information that we're able to receive. But to me, I am just a little very concerned about Congress now wanting to jump in and do something now about now that these players are able to make money off of their name, image, and likeness when we weren't getting 3 meals a day. They didn't give a damn about us then, but now they care about us now that the money's there. And so that really bothers me. But um, like we discussed earlier, you said that you hope players understand how much money is being lobbied, towards them basically kind of shutting them down, into making them as much money as possible.
Yeah, the NCAA, the first quarter of this year, they spent almost $500,000 to lobby to lobby Congress. Basically, they want an antitrust exemption, which would prevent players from them really being paid their market value. Because even
Yeah,
right now with this house settlement, with each team that I've seen getting about, I think, 22, $23 million, that still doesn't address market value.
mm,
And
mm,
um, I hope the players are understanding like what's happening sort of above them. And you
yeah,
said something that was interesting in your answer. You said like when you were in college that you were not aware. It seems like you weren't really aware of the entire financial structure, maybe of the
yeah.
NCAA or the money that's coming in or what you're generating. Uh, I mean, maybe you weren't, but like, was that ever a conversation that you can remember there? Because I remember Chris Webber, he had said that it struck him, you know, that his jersey was selling in the bookstore for like $100, but he was having a hard time scraping together, money to eat. So like,
Right.
did the unfairness of that ever? Did you ever notice that when you were playing at Tennessee?
I just visualize that juxtaposition from Chris Webber. That's got to be some Black Mirror level type of psychological, like, right there. That's crazy. Jamel, it wasn't a conversation that we were having regularly, but I do remember conversations like, Coach Fulmer, and I love him to death. He's my favorite coach, but we would see him pull up in a new Lexus, and we're like, hey, we used to mess with him like, hey, coach, let us get some of that money. You know what I mean? And we understood that, like, we were a major part of the reason why he got the contracts, why the University of Tennessee had an Adidas contract at the time, right before we moved to Nike. And so, those conversations were had, but kind of more in jest. I do remember Jamal Lewis, and I'll never forget this, practicing. And he was just, he was a specimen. As a true freshman, I wasn't there. I was a year behind him, but as a true freshman, he was just a specimen. Peyton Manning's last year, I think he ran for like 1,300 yards as a true freshman. You weren't doing that back in those days, but I remember seeing him his last year, his junior year, which was I think my redshirt sophomore year or redshirt freshman year, and he would be practicing. He'd have his sweatpants on. He'd be practicing his with his pockets turned inside out.
Mm.
And I always thought like, okay, oh, it looks cool, like Jamal dressed up sweet when he practiced. He was quick, fast, superstar, all this stuff. And I walked up to him one day at practice and I said, why are your pockets always turned inside out? And he was like, because I'm broke and I don't have anything in my pockets but lint and I'm trying to get it. And I started doing that, right? And I think the the mindset at that time was like, well, I'm not getting any money from them, so I've got to get this money on my own. I've got to work hard and be able to put myself in a position where I can take care of my family, et cetera, et cetera. And so those were the conversations that were happening more than it wasn't necessarily about the financial structure. Or any deep conversations, I would say it was kind of more in jest. Like I said, we'd see Coach Fulmer pull up in a new Lexus, and we'd be like, "Hey," or we'd go to his house and be like, "Damn, he's got a nice house." Like, okay, this is nice. But that was kind of the extent for us. But I am glad that today that the players are well in tuned. Like I said, there's so much more information, and I'm excited that they're in the position that they're in. But like you said, I'm really in the same position of hoping that they understand what's happening above their head here in Washington D.C., where I live, where like you said, the NCAA has lobbied $500,000 or close to $500,000. So uh, those are the things I think that needs to be the next step for the college players is to not only understand the structure with which you're in, but also the structure beyond that, and that would be the government here in Washington D.C. And so once they can get to that point, they can fight against it. They're more aware of it, and I hope that happens. But I'm not sure how that's going, to be honest.
Now, like you, this wild wild west feeling in college sports is really completely the NCAA's fault. They had an
Yep.
opportunity
Yep.
they've had many opportunities to share the equity with college players. They have chosen not to do that. And
Yep.
so they get their ass kicked in court every single time because you can't
Right.
say that the players aren't employees, but then you want to restrict their movement and restrict their earnings. Both those things can't be true. All right.
Right.
And
Right.
my prediction is, and I'd love to hear how you might feel about this. This is my prediction for college sports. It will not exist in a decade unless they collectively bargain. They're going to have to
Mm.
collectively bargain directly with. I think they could take out college football and college basketball because they operate on separate television contracts. Negotiate directly with those players and come to an agreement, and then it will also help because then if you actually if you actually understand or agree to the fact that they're employees, much like how the NFLPA operates, and we'll talk about that in a minute, is that then you can put in restrictions about transferring. Then you can put in
Right.
salary caps and that
Right.
kind of thing because
Right.
it's collectively bargained and it'll
Right.
create
Right.
a system that makes sense for everybody as opposed to you spending all this money trying to stop something that you can't stop because any of the things that they
Mm.
try to do they're not going to hold up in court. And at least from what I've been able to glean from those on Capitol Hill, there's not a whole lot of appetite to save the NCAA from itself. So
Jemele, I love that. And can I let me? I know this is. I know I'm not the host, but can I ask you a question because
sure.
that's a very important point. I think that's something that I haven't seen. Maybe it has been discussed, but I haven't seen that discussed in depth. Right? Because when you're talking about changing systems, deep rooted systems, you can't think of technocratic changes. This has to be. Sometimes these have to be full exercise like changes like that are so big that encapsulates more than just the infrastructure of or working within the infrastructure that has already been established, right? So for the players to CBA, do you think that, or how in any ways do you think that would change the student aspect of it? How would that change? Because I love that, Jamel. I'm like I'm sorry. I want to know what you think.
Okay, so it's a couple things that we have to let go. And you know this playing at Tennessee is that you are on a professional schedule. And having a prof. I'm not saying that they abandon the academic requirements. I think if
Yeah.
anything, they might be able to use collective bargaining to maybe strengthen those in some areas. But I think you have to sort of give up the whole concept of student athlete, which there's a very interesting history behind that. I'm currently reading this book by a man named Walter Byers, who was once he led the NCAA. He's the whole reason he coined the term student athlete, so that
Hmm.
the NCAA was going to get sued because a football player died on the field. And he purposely coined the term student athlete so that you wouldn't think of them as employees. It was always, they were
Mm,
selling the amateurism narrative because they were trying to avoid a lawsuit. And
mm, wow.
he's the reason why there's this humongous rule book in the NCAA, or there was one. And after he left the NCAA, he then writes a book just shredding basically everything that he did, which was all about the NCAA avoiding liability. I encourage people to, if you want to read it, I encourage you to pick up this book. And it
Yeah,
is,
100%.
yeah, it is amazing. And so, he was the first executive director specifically of the NCAA, and his book is called Unsportsmanlike Conduct: Exploiting College Athletes. So after developing a rule book to exploit them, he then wrote about how it was all bullshit and done just to
Right.
just to save money.
Right. I
So
don't know if I respect that or
I
not.
right,
It's
yeah. I mean, I respect it. Like he did it to
right,
avoid, they
right,
did it to avoid liability. Like I respect it, but at the
right,
same time, he was just
right,
like, this was stupid. Like we should have never
right.
tried to put a cap on their earnings. Like he really went into detail. So it's part of a larger
Wow.
piece that I'm working on for the Atlantic. But that's a story
Ooh.
for another day. But at any
Okay.
rate,
Okay.
to answer your question, is that I think at this point the charade that this is about college is not going to work. If anything, I would love to see them develop curriculums that are about, sort of financial responsibility, like really
Hmm.
things where
Hmm.
you can essentially major in how to professionalize yourself as an athlete. Of course, you can still take
Mm.
your core classes and all those sorts of things, but I'd like to see them sort of stop trying to pretend that they give a shit about whether or not players get their degrees or not. Because you
Right.
also know that in college, playing for these teams, they already steer players towards certain majors anyway that are not as
Yeah.
taxing.
Right.
So it's like,
Right.
why are we even pretending, like it's the hypocrisy. It's
Yes.
like, why are we even pretending what this
Yes.
is? Like we know what this
Yes.
is. It's professional
Right.
sports. It's just what it
Right.
is. So at any rate, that's sort of my 2 cents on it. But
Yes.
since we're talking about college sports now, this is not related to the NIL. But since you went to Tennessee and you said Charles Woodson and your man, the question: do you think that Peyton Manning was robbed of that Heisman? Because Charles Woodson, you wow.
No. No. And I unequivocally, unabashedly will say that. And I've said it to Tennessee folks all the time. And I love Peyton Manning. I love the family. They're the best. Peyton would come back and throw with us. We would. I was I was shocked, really, that Peyton Manning would come back um, after he had been in the NFL his rookie year, second, third year. He would come back every year and throw with us in the summer,
Mm-hmm.
and then he would hang out with us and like give us food and stuff and talk to us. And Peyton was awesome. Peyton Manning was amazing. I love him. However, Charles Woodson, I think that entire year he just played like the best player in college football. Peyton Manning didn't have many good games against Florida, and his senior year, uh, he never beat Florida, but his senior year, he threw an interception. I think that was a pick six.
Mm-hmm.
It was early in the year, but it really hurt his chances, I think, at winning the Heisman. And Woodson, from start to finish, had a great season when he ended the year with a couple catches on offense and that punt return against Ohio State when he took that to the house and hit the Heisman. I mean, that was
And the one
you know
hand interception he had against,
against
unfortunately,
Washington State.
no, Michigan
Oh no,
State.
Michigan State. Oh
Yeah,
yes, on the
yeah.
sidelines.
And I was like,
Yes, with the
unfortunately,
white jersey, Jamel.
that was the
I'm
moment.
telling you, I thought I was Woodson.
That was very brutally honest of you to say that you thought Woodson deserved it. Now, I don't know if you're going to be able to return to Tennessee, but it all works out. Um, I want to pivot and talk about your NFL career because I didn't realize this until I was doing research for this, for talking to you. I knew you were in New Orleans. I didn't realize you were in New Orleans when Katrina happened.
Yeah.
You spent your first 4 seasons of your career there. this is now the 20th anniversary, which is hard to believe from when Katrina hit. August will be officially the 20th anniversary. Um, from what you recall, like what was that time like?
It was wild. So I was drafted in 2002 and Katrina hit August 29th, I believe, 2005. When prior to that, we had to leave New Orleans two or three times because of tropical storms or, hurricanes. We'd leave to San Antonio. They would tell us to pack for 2 days, and we would come back on the third day, whatever that was, whether if it was a Friday or a Thursday night after practice. We would come back after practicing in San Antonio, and we, a lot of the times, really every time that we left, we could have stayed because it wasn't that bad, right? And that's the kind of sense that I got when people were talking about Hurricane Katrina, like leading up to it. They're in New Orleans. They get these hurricanes, these storms all the time. But I'll never forget, Jamel, the night before Thursday night, we had played the Ravens, I believe. It was at home. And I fell asleep with the Weather Channel on that night after the game. And I woke up and I think that Katrina was like a a high cat 3 or a low cat 4, and it was still churning in the Gulf of Mexico. And as you know, hurricanes, they get stronger, the winds get more powerful when they get into the warm water of the Gulf. So from that point, I figured that Hurricane Katrina would be bad. I didn't think that the levees would break. That wasn't even something that registered in my mind. But I thought it would be bad just because it was going to be a big storm that came through a city that was in a bowl, right? So when they came by and told us to leave or told us to pack for like 2 or 3 days that we were going to leave, and I didn't have any like realization of what was actually going to happen, but I didn't think it was going to be good just because the hurricane was so big. And I took two of my biggest pieces of luggage. I took a bunch of suits, I took a bunch of clothes, and people were looking at me like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Have y'all not seen the Weather Channel? This thing is a 5." Like before we left, I think it was a 5, Jamel. And we were leaving to go to Oakland because we had Oakland that Thursday night. The hurricane hit, I think Monday morning, like at 2 or 3 a.m. And we had left, I think it was either Saturday night or early Sunday morning we left. So we get to Oakland, we're playing the Raiders. We wake up the next day and the levees had burst. And so we're seeing parts of the city underwater that we were just in, few days ago. And to me, that was so surreal, Jamel. I'll never forget those images. And actually, I was able to get back to Metairie, which is where the Saints facility is. I was able to get back there with Aaron Stecker and Michael Lewis. We flew back from and landed in Baton Rouge. One of Michael Lewis's good friends, because Michael Lewis is from New Orleans, born and raised. They called him the Beer Man. So Michael Lewis, he had one of his friends that worked at NASA or worked for NASA to pick us up. And he actually used his badge to get us through several military, not police, but military barricades. And so we got all the way to our facility. We get to our facility, Jamel. Our cars are in the parking lot, but that's where FEMA had their headquarters. They were everywhere. It was like a movie, Jamel. It was like we walked into a war zone. And they had tents up, they had all these military vehicles. We go into our facility, and one of the wide receiver room at the time was one of the first rooms that you would walk into. All of our plays had been erased, and FEMA's playbook was up there. It was so surreal. It felt like a movie walking through there. And we talked to some of the folks there, and I wish I would have taken pictures. I wish I would have uh, been able to kind of catalog more exactly what happened. But for me, I was in shock. It just no one was on the streets. I mean, it just seemed like a scene straight out of a movie. And then, you get the people that were displaced down there that were evacuated out of New Orleans, and a lot of them were sent to places that they had no connections to. I remember hearing that some got sent to Alaska. I'm like, what is our government doing? But I did go down when I got back to San Antonio. I did go down to the Air Force base there, and I didn't know what to do, Jamel. I knew I was an NFL player. I was blessed. I had money, and I asked our media guy, what could I do to like what what can I do to help? And I said, I went to Walmart and bought a bunch of things that they'd been asking for, um, to give to people in those situations. And so I just filled my trunk up with that stuff. And I went to our media guy, said, "Hey, what can I do? Where can I take this to? Who can I give this to?" And he was like, "Oh, you like where like you did this on your own?" I said, "Yeah, I just tell me where to go so I can drop this stuff off and talk to some people." And he was like, "Oh, well, let's get media cameras." And I'm like, "Nah, bro." I'm like, "I'm not doing that, man. That's not why I'm doing this." And after a protest from me for a while, he eventually talked me into letting, I think, a reporter from ESPN come with me during that time. And walking in there, Jemele, and I'm getting chills, and my heart is starting to beat real fast right now thinking about it. Jemele, these folks had lost everything they ever worked for in their life. They lost family members. They lost photo albums, things you can't replace ever. You know what I mean? You can't replace. There was no cloud back in 2005 where you could upload your photos, your family photos. You know what I mean? So going there and seeing those people and seeing them in that position, but then they're all asking me how I'm doing, and they're asking me how Aaron Brooks is doing, how Deuce McAllister, how's Bill Horn. And Jamel, I for the life of me, I couldn't figure that out. It took me a while, and so I told them, I was like, "Oh, we're doing good. We got here, um, and we're setting up." But I was like, I'm more concerned how you guys are doing. And I was like, we'll be okay. And they're like, "No, no, no, no. We need you to be more than okay. We need you to go win this season opener against the Panthers, who were just coming off a Super Bowl loss, last second Super Bowl loss to the Patriots. So the Panthers were a very good team, and they were in our division, and we were opening up in Carolina. And that was the sentiment, Jamel, that I got around that Air Force base when I was speaking to folks. None of them said, "Hey, can you help me find this person or that person or locate this and that?" They were all like, "How are you doing? We need y'all to win this game." And that's when it hit me, Jamel. I said, "Damn." I said, "These people have been through the worst thing they've ever experienced in their life, and they need some kind of reprieve from the grief, from the damage that has been done to them, and that is and the psychological toll that they've been taking. And we have to be that. We don't have a choice. We were not going to play, Jamal. We were before all this. We took it. There was a team consensus where we were basically like, you know what, f those games. Like we're going to go back to New Orleans and help. We need to take care of our families. There was almost a team rebellion that was right on the cusp. So a lot of the players we had met players only meeting, and we were trying to figure out what the hell we were going to do. We didn't know if we were staying in San Antonio. We didn't know if we were going to Houston. I mean, we were voting on all this stuff. There was even New York City as a suggestion. Um, we didn't know what the hell was going on, and there was no precedent. There was no blueprint for this. And I think, I think amongst all that commotion and all that uncertainty and instability, I think players were like, "Let's just go back to New Orleans and help, man, and figure out what we can do to help. We've got resources." We've got manpower. Let's go back and help. And I think the majority of the players wanted to do that. There were a few guys that wanted to play still, but I think most of the people, and I don't fault them for that. Everybody has their own reasons, but majority, the consensus, I think, was we were all ready to like say we're not playing. We're gonna go back and help, and you guys got to figure this out. Like not us. And honestly, I think the instability and the uncertainty of like where we were even going to stay had a major role in all of that. We were familiar with New Orleans. We lived there. We loved our fans. We love our fans. It's a great place. I mean, New Orleans is awesome. So we wanted to be there for the people, and I think a lot of our minds changed once we went down to those centers or Air Force bases or wherever people were being housed at the current time. And Jamel, like I said before, I'm telling you, I just get chills when I think about it, and it reminds me how important sports are. It reminds me what sports can do for people, right? Um, and every now and then, I think maybe not recently, but I think especially after I retired, I was trying to remove myself so much the from the kind of moniker of me just being a football player that I kind of shrugged off the importance, and then I was reminded again, um, after I think one of the anniversaries of Katrina, to be honest. And so that had such a devastating impact on the people down there, economically, obviously. Uh, More importantly, people lost their lives and family and friends, and like I said, memories that you can't replace. And I think one of the things too that I learned was that the U.S. government contracted the mercenary group Blackwater to go down there, and that was a major part for me, kind of understanding, like you talked about with the college players, understanding what's happening above your head, right? Not just the images that we're seeing on TV, but the things that are not being talked about. But yeah, Katrina was tough, and New Orleans will always have my heart, not just because I was drafted there and the people accepted me and it's a great place, but the resolve they showed after New Orleans really taught me a lot.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
when
sorry, after Katrina in New Orleans really taught me a lot.
yeah, and still one of the greatest moments in sports is when they reopen the Superdome back up and they're able to play, and that moment is unbelievable, and
Yeah,
to see how they were able to come back from all of that is really outstanding. Everywhere you went during that terrible time of Katrina and dealing with the aftermath, that a lot of the New Orleans residents and people who were there were just like, "Hey, we just need you guys to win." Unfortunately, that's not how that season turned out. Saints, you all weren't very good that year. I think you won three
yeah,
games. Um,
yeah,
how much? Because I came down there. I think then because that was the year you all played at LSU, right?
yeah,
Yeah, you guys
yeah.
played at
We
LSU.
had 3 games in San Antonio at the
Yep.
Alamo Dome, and then the rest of our home games were at LSU, except for our first home game was in New York, and George H.W. Bush came down, and a couple other people came down, and it was it. Yeah, go ahead. Don't get me started on
No, no. I mean, it
that.
was because I covered a game that you all played at in Baton Rouge at LSU, and that was I had not. I remember very distinctly what pre Katrina New Orleans looked like, and then seeing it afterwards was you felt like you had stepped into a completely different universe. You could
Yeah,
still smell almost like the sewage in the city. Like you could still smell it. And this was,
yeah,
months later. But
yep.
nevertheless, even though people were looking for the team to be kind of a reprieve, it was a rough season. How much did just the volatility of all of that, how much did that impact how you guys played?
I think it impacted big time. And one thing I can say though was that Jim Haslett was our head coach, and I think he had been on the hot seat anyway,
Mhm.
but he did the best he could, and we were competitive. I would say most of the games that year, except for a couple, we just got our heads beat in. But we were competitive in almost every game. And now, mind you, we had our locker room in a dugout at one point. Um, so we had the not we didn't even have the minimal of what an NFL team is used to having. We didn't have hot tubs or cold tubs. We didn't have access to any of that stuff. And again, you talk about resilience. I saw a team come together. Um, we didn't win many games, but we were competitive. We didn't lay down. We were competitive in every game. And if and I'm not just saying that, right? Like anybody can go back and watch those games, and we were competitive in a majority of them. And that season, the folks in San Antonio really they really looked out for us. They brought us in as like one of their own. They showed up to all the games that we had there, the 3 games. They sold out the stadiums, like, and I was at that moment I didn't want to leave New Orleans, but I was like, at some point San Antonio they need a team because they showed up for us and they loved us there and we loved being there under the circumstances. But there was some tough times that season, but you get to see who people really are in those situations. And I can honestly say, we fought hard, and that was something that I was probably proud of, that I haven't really thought about until you just asked me that. Even though our record didn't indicate as such, but we played hard. We played our asses off that year.
And to your point, you mentioned how you guys opened up against the Panthers. You're
Yeah,
in New York. You all won that game.
yeah, yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like you won that game.
yeah.
So that, because I sort of I remember that, and I think a lot of people were thinking like, could this, as horrible as this tragedy is, could this be one of those, kind of type of
Right.
seasons?
And then the answer quickly became
Yes,
no.
and then there, right. I was like, it kind of went south after that, but
Yeah,
you got off to a good
yeah.
foot. That's all.
We did. We did.
that's,
We did.
that's all that
We
matters.
did.
Now, Dante, anybody who knows your history know that you went through a lot in your NFL career, and what I found to be interesting is after you didn't play in 2009,
Mhm.
because of your conviction, uh, that you went around talking, or that you went to the rookie symposium, and that you have gone around talking to college teams about some of the decisions you made that led to you being convicted of DUI manslaughter. When you're in those rooms, because people ask me this all the time, like, why doesn't the NFL have classes? Why don't they have guys come back? Michael Vick has come back and spoken at the NFL rookie
Yeah.
symposium. Like
Yeah.
everybody, Ray Rice, everybody who has been
Yep.
in a situation comes back and talks to the players about, hey, this is how you avoid going through what I went through. So when you're
Yep.
speaking to teams and athletes, like, what is your message to them? And knowing that a lot of them are sitting there thinking, this will never be me. Like, yeah, that's a terrible thing that happened, but it won't be me. Like, how do you break through that?
Um, Initially, Jamel, I think I just have to connect with them uh on a primitive level for football players, and that's football, right? It's not me being some old head coming in here to tell y'all, hey, don't do this, don't do that. Um, I engage with them initially. I'll try to lighten the mood by telling a joke or something like that, like and getting to know the players before I get there and kind of name drop one of them in a way like uh, I think Lad McConkey was when he was in Georgia. I was speaking there and talking about how fast he was and how quick he was, and I just kind of joked with the players about like none of them, even though I was 43 at the time, none of them wanted to race me. And if they wanted to, once I finished, we can go, just kind of setting the stage with them and getting let them know, like, hey man, I'm one of y'all, man. I'm not here to be this old head that's telling y'all not to do this, not to do that. But you connect with them on that level and understand and let them know, like I'm one of y'all, bro. I sat in that seat and I'm everything that you're thinking, like, okay, yeah, this is bad. This is a terrible situation that could have been prevented, but that'll never happen to me. And we heard those conversations. We heard those conversations in our rookie symposium. And you don't dismiss the person, but you're young and you're in a position of wealth and fame, and you're living your childhood dream. And all these great things are happening, and you don't see the pitfalls that are right next to you with one wrong step. And so a lot of things that I talk to the players about, and I've spoken at, I've done some work with the NHL. I've spoken at numerous colleges to both the men and women's programs. Um, and I think one of the constant, consistent messages that I try to get them to be aware of is number one, what do you want your legacy to be? Right? Because no matter what I do in life, I could go on and become the president of the United States. Not that I want that, but I could go on and do many great things, but that's always going to be a part of my story, right? And what I try to get in people's head is these things don't happen in a vacuum, right? Like these situations don't happen in a vacuum. There's something, little decision here, little decision there that may just be right under the under like the superficial level to where you're not recognizing what you're doing is adding to a situation that eventually will snowball and you can't control it. And so once you get them to understand, like every decision you make has a consequence, negative or positive. And one thing I try to talk to them about is whatever your craft is, whether if it's football, basketball, gymnastics, you have to study that like no other, right? So why aren't we studying our habits like we study our playbook? Why aren't we studying ourselves and who we are as people when we're doing the same thing for football? Let's do that. Let's see what kind of decision maker you are under pressure. Let's see if you're going to be the one to say, hey, my friend or my teammate's been drinking, he shouldn't be driving. Are you going to be that guy? Or are you going to be the cool, chill guy that's just like, he's grown, he can do what he want? You know what I mean? Like, are you going to step in and be that person? All these different things can come up in a situation where you could save yourself, you could save others. And when I discuss this with them, I interact with them, and one of the things, Jamel, that I talk to them about, or that I ask them, is ask them, how many times do you think that you drive under the influence before you're pulled over the first time?
Mm.
And some of them will say in the teens, or 20, 30. The number is 80. You are if you drink regularly, you are under the influence 80 times before the first time that you're pulled over for a DUI. And people forget DUI is not you being sloppy, it's not you not being able to put your keys in your car door. It's essentially two drinks. That is being under the influence, right? Legally in the federal sense. And so when I'm in a position to sit in there, I humanize the situation. Again, I'm not talking to them like this is what happened, or this is the decision I made, this is what happened to me. And I make it more human because it is more human. I talk to them about Mr. Mario Reyes, the man that passed away, the man that when I hit, he didn't make it. I talk to them about his daughter not having her father. Like I tell them, like, it's not just about you, bruh. These are situations that reverberate to other people and have long lasting, life lasting impact on other people. And no one, you don't want to do that intentionally, right? No one's intentionally doing it, but that's what's happening. And so when you're not when you're not cognizant of the decisions that you're making on a day-to-day basis, you can be put in a situation yourself that you didn't realize how you got there until you realize, and you start looking at the decisions, the little small decisions that you've been making over weeks, months, years. And I think it's important for people to understand that, because a lot of times, Jamel, people just kind of go with the flow, right? You just go with whatever life. Like every now and then, for on New Year's, people have New Year's resolutions, but why don't we do that every month or every quarter? If I feel like if we do those things, if we self-evaluate a lot more, then a lot of the times we can stop some of these self-sabotaging concept or actions that we are taking upon ourselves.
When you had to sit out the 2009 season for violating the league's personal conduct policy, what did you learn about yourself during that time?
Um, you know what? I learned that I was resilient. Um, I learned that I was more emotional than I gave myself credit for, because I at that time, Jamel, I knew that I couldn't move forward until I forgave myself. And I couldn't forgive myself until the family had forgiven me. And I didn't think that would ever happen, not because I knew the family and or because of what happened. Just it just was like, who would forgive someone for that? And a couple weeks after, actually, the family, through their attorneys, contacted my attorney and said that they were appreciative of the way I handled everything, from the way that from after the immediate uh, injury, how it happened. And then I was the first. There were a number of 911 calls. I was the first one to call. I stayed on the scene. And I don't say that to say like I'm some good person. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying though is that through all of that, and knowing that a number of people take off not necessarily out of malice, but because they're scared. And that's one of the things the state attorney told me. But the fact that I stayed there and I called 911 and I did everything that I could to try to help at that moment, um, I think that I was able to kind of see who I really was as a person, because everyone says what they would do in certain situations. You never know until you're in it. And I know it seems, like I'm patting myself on the back, but to hear how many people actually take off, and again, not necessarily because of malicious purposes, but just because they're scared, and your fight or flight kicks in, and most people flee. And but I saw a man lying in the street, and well, I there was no mention, and there was no thought in my mind to not do anything other than to reach in my back seat and grab my phone so I can call 911. And that all actually, the fact that the family appreciated that, the fact that they appreciated that, I didn't blame him for running in the middle of the highway. Um, because I in my mind I figured that if I wasn't on the road, then none of this would have happened. And I think honestly, I know this is probably weird, but being accountable in football, I think really helped shape who I am as a person too. Because as we say in football, the eye in the sky don't lie. You can say what you want about the film, but the film is the film, and you have to be held accountable for what you put on film. And that's kind of the way I kind of handled that situation, was that this is something that I did, and I'm going to take responsibility for my actions. And I think that really helped the family kind of see that, oh, he's not what the media has been portraying as, some spoiled rich athlete who's yet in a trouble again, another athlete. They saw me as a human being. I thought that was very important for me to be able to forgive myself and start the healing process. Um, and the NFL was they were instrumental in that. I think Roger Goodell honestly helped a lot. Having conversations with him, you know, really helped, because he told me, he said, listen, man, he's like, I know obviously the situation is horrible and it's a tragedy, and you made a poor judgment decision that is irrevocable, and to the league, to yourself, to your family. He's like, but I'm not here to take your career away. I'm not here to take your job away. But I am going to suspend you for this year, because I think you need some time off. You need some time to reflect, and I want you to do these, to go through the league's therapy sessions at the time. Um, and that helped me out a lot. Something else that I realized was that, and I guess probably me pushing back on it initially, being a psychology major, but um, it helped me out so much, and it took the stigma away from, from talking to a therapist. It took that stigma away from me. As football players, and particularly football players, this kind of Spartan, tough sport where you're taught to suppress your any mental weakness or any physical weakness, and that a lot of times carries off the field as well, right? And so, and part of that, part of mental toughness is not saying you're tired, not saying you need help, or you need to speak with someone, or you have to talk to someone because your head's not right. But I think today that stigma has gone, or not gone totally, but it's definitely changed a lot. The nomenclature that we speak about, people speaking with therapists, has totally changed since then. So I learned a lot during that, Jamel, and it taught me a lot, not just about me, but about like how to try to help others. And so I just go in there and I just tell my story and tell the situation, talk about the impact that it had, not just on me and my family and the league and people around me, but Mr. Reyes and his family as well, his friends and family, right? Because that's another part of it too. And I worked with Mad a lot in those days, and built a good relationship with them, and got to speak to people. I mean, Jamel, it was, speaking for the first times was hard, and I always play that 911 call that I made, because it's always hard for me to hear it, but I want them to feel it. I want them to hear my voice. I want them to hear the urgency. I want them to hear the confusion in my voice, as far as like this, like, did this actually happen? And I try to make it as real for them as possible. And honestly, Jamel, a lot of them come up to me and tell me stories that they said they haven't told anyone, or talk to me about things. A lot of them I exchange information with, and been in touch with a lot of folks. And that's never something, I was never a person that wanted to talk a lot or wanted to get up in front of people. I was that kid that literally like took a zero on a paper because I didn't want to get up and say it in front of the team. But I realized that, I don't have that luxury. Like, I can't not speak out, right? I can't not take these opportunities to speak to young folks, to speak to anyone who needs to hear this story, and who needs to hear my situation and how everything happened and what I've been doing since, because I think it's important for people to hear.
Um, you came back, you played for 3 more seasons. Did football feel the same to you?
Hey, I'm Jemele. That's a good question. No, it didn't. It was always my first love. Um, it was it was so it was the only thing in my life. Growing up, I didn't care about girls. I didn't care about going outside with friends. I was in the house watching football, playing football. I was all football, Jamel. And no, it changed. It's funny. No one's ever asked me that after all these years. And I've never even thought about that. That's why I was like, damn. No, it wasn't. And I think there were a number of factors, I think. I don't think it was just that, but the fact that I was out for a year and watching that sucked because that was the first year that I hadn't played football since I was 9.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So that part of it was hard, but I think also too, like still trying to find myself or like like figure out what was going on or what was happening with me. But also too, there were a number of things happening around that same time where I started to become more politically aware. And it was right around time when Obama got elected, so I started paying more and more attention to politics. And so I think a culmination of several factors played a role in that. And I still love the game. I still love to practice. I still love to work out, but it wasn't the same. Did you know? No one's ever asked me that, and I've never thought about that before.
Mm.
Damn.
Well,
Damn.
when you retire, you're still young. I mean, you're what, mid 30s at that point, 34,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
that might be quote old in football years. You talk, whenever I've talked to a lot of professional athletes about how did they know when it was time to go, like typically they didn't. So I'm wondering
Right.
with
Right.
you, like, was that your experience as well? Like, did how did you know when it was time to retire?
I'll be concise. It's a pretty interesting story. It's interesting to me. I came back and played 3 years, and after that, and 2012 was the first year that I was. Well, actually, I got cut. I got cut in the middle of 2020 or 2011, and then Leonard Hankerson broke his foot, and so they brought me right back the following week, and then I finished the season there. But 2012 was the first time I got cut in the preseason. So I wasn't on an opening day roster for the first time in my career in 2012 when I was released by the New England Patriots. And I continued to work out that entire season. I worked out um, for a few teams. I think it was I think I went to Buffalo. I think I went to Miami and a couple other teams. But I didn't sign with anyone until Julian Edelman broke his foot actually in Miami, and I was at that game. And so and I had just gone up to New England like 2 or 3 weeks prior to that, and they worked me out. And I go down there, and I didn't see Julian back in the game, so I was hoping he was okay. I wasn't even thinking about like him being hurt and them needing to sign me, right? And I get down to the locker room, and Brady walks up to me. He's like, "Hey, dude," he's like, "Jules broke his foot, man." So he's like, "Be ready." He's like, "Because they're gonna call you either today or tomorrow." And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, damn, all right. I've been working out and training, so I was fine. But I come back that next week. We play the Texans on Monday night. I think that was like they deemed it the Letterman game or whatever
Mhm.
when the Texans walked off the bus or the plane with their Letterman jackets and got spanked. Um, I caught one pass, Jamel, that game for 70, 69 yards, something like that, 74 yards, whatever it was. And that was a 74-yard touchdown. That was the last catch of my career. That was the last play of my career. Even though I was in training camp the following season with Washington, that was the final play of my career, which is probably one of the highlights of my career. But um, to answer your question, so all these things are happening, right? And I know now, like, all right, you're at the end, dude. Like, you're not going to play 20 years like Jerry Rice did. You're getting cut in training camp, and that's usually, I still had faith in my talents, but that was like kind of kind of the beginnings of the end, right? And so 2013, I get in a hot air balloon accident in Miami, and that set me back from Jamel. That was in March. That I think that Friday, I think it happened on a Saturday. That Thursday or Friday was my first time. I was coming off, so I sprained my ankle that game. I had a high ankle sprain that game that ended my season. And then so I went on IR and all that. So I didn't play another game. And then I was training all off season, and that week was the first time I had run like on grass that first time, and then that hot air balloon accident happened. So then I get set back another 2, 3 months. So now this is, March is when um it was like when teams start signing free agency and stuff. So uh teams were like, whoa, like this dude just like tore his ankle last year and now he's in a hot air balloon accident. He's about to be 33 this year. He's probably done. And so my agent, Drew Rosenhaus, of course, was like, of course he was like, he's not done. He's still working to get back. And my friend Amy Palcic was like, she was like, hey, you need to tell Drew to shut the fuck up and tell him to stop talking about football. And so I was like, hey, Drew, chill. But that situation, I finally got an invite from Washington. They invited me back during mini camp to work out. And after the first day, Shanahan was like, "Oh, he's fine. We're gonna sign him." But I was never right after that, and I think the like being electrocuted, I think it really like did something to my muscles, and I already had some raggedy hamstrings anyway, so that didn't help. And then I was 33 years old, 32 years old, so that didn't help. And I was having actually a good camp, Jamel, and I pulled my hamstring in camp. I got released that next those next few weeks. I still worked out until October, Jamel, and then I just woke up one day and was like, "Do I want to really keep waking up at 7 o'clock and going to train for 3 hours?" And I thought I was just being lazy, so I forced myself the next 2 days to do it because I didn't know if there was something larger happening, right? Like retirement. I didn't know if there was something larger happening that I'm not really picking up on. I went to train the next 2 days and I was like, nope, that's it. I'm done. And I at that same time, all these funny things started happening, Jamel. I had some friends who had been telling me for a few months to watch Newsroom. They were like, how haven't you seen Newsroom on
Mhm.
HBO? That's right up your alley. You would love that. And as I'm watching this, actually, Jamel was one of the things that kept me from working out too, to be honest with you. I was so into the show, and I'm like, I love the news. I've always loved the news. I want to work in a newsroom. And then, right at the same time, I had a close friend, Jeremy Scahill and Glenn Greenwald, who were two guys, like two investigative journalists, especially Jeremy Scahill, who I befriended and is a good friend of mine. They were always speaking truth to power, and this was, like I said, at the time where I was learning about all these things that were happening, that our government was doing abroad after 9/11 and the war on terror and all this, and how that affected things that were happening back home here in the States. And I'm I'm getting calls from Jeremy and Glenn, and they're starting this new media company, and they were still under the assumption. I haven't even told anyone. I hadn't told my mom that I had mentally kind of checked out and was retiring. But um, I get a call from these guys, and they're like, "Hey, we're starting this new media organization called The Intercept, and we want you to write for us. We know you're still playing football, but can you write for us?" And I'm like, "Okay, like here's some signs from God. Like you're old, your hamstrings are fried." And all these things you want to do, I'm putting these opportunities right in front of you. So, like, are you listening? And so I kind of made up my mind within in that moment, Jamel, within a week, and realized that I wanted to get into journalism. I wanted to write more. I wanted to learn more about national security, about foreign affairs. I love history, so like learning about international relations and how all these things are connected. I really uh, started focusing on that more than I did football until I eventually mentally retired and then officially retired.
It, the and listen, that hot air balloon incident, you like literally caught on fire.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean that
yeah,
is it's just mind boggling. I haven't been in a hot air balloon. I cannot imagine what that must have been
yeah.
like. But you made a very sharp turn into journalism and into politics and foreign affairs. You know, most guys when they retire, they're going into like real estate and all that. You
Right,
pick this very
right.
meaty industry to be a part of. As you started to make your way in the journalism and political commentary side, what kind of surprised you the most about how that industry operated?
I think it was right away, Jamel, when I got a job offer from the Huffington Post shortly after that, and I was also a commentator for Comcast New England calling the Patriots games. So um, I'm as soon as like Ariana Huffington's like tweeting about it, and all these journalists, which I learned to be like these conservative right wing journalists, were criticizing it, like, "Oh, what's the Huffington Post? What a joke!" and all of this, right? And I'm like, what's happening right now? Like, why are they mad at me? I have nothing to do with y'all beef. I don't even know what's going on, right? And then I start to learn, oh, there's beef between conservative and liberal media and leftist media and far right media, all this stuff, right? I'm just thinking the naivete in me was like, oh, everybody's just here focused on the truth, and that's how we're gonna move. Like football, right? We're all here for the same goal, and we're gonna move and move in the right direction together in unison. And no, it was immediately right away I was being attacked. They started finding old tweets of mine and saying all this stuff, and I'm just like, what is happening here? But luckily I had a ton of people coming to my back, a ton of journalists, political journalists, in particular Jeremy Scahill and Greenwald really came in like huge support of me when all these people started to attack me, which I didn't, like I said, I didn't realize that there was beef between media. I just thought everybody was focused on the truth, and then that's how we're going to operate. But no, as you know very well, dealing with folks, so it was something I think that's probably shocked me more than anything, Jamel. And again, although I've been on a ton of teams in my life and my career, I realized that the only team that I want to be on as a journalist is the side of objectivity and truth. And that's not how a lot of people operate. A lot of people operate more on what's best for them and what's financially best for them. So that's something that I can't get down with. I mean, get your money, whatever, do what you want to do, but that's like I believe in what I believe, and if that's going to get me paid, fine. If not, then that's fine too.
Yeah, that part, as I began to make more headway on the broadcast TV side, that's not to say that print journalists don't do some of the same. It was just
Right,
more in your face on the broadcast side, where you literally see people
right,
who are playing a role. Like it's like they're an
right,
actor,
right,
and you're like, wait
right,
a minute, you know. Um,
right.
I can't, like you. I can't do that. Like
No, you are who you
I am
are,
who
and
I
we love
am, and
you.
it just I'll just take whatever backlash comes with that. But I think
Right,
people would
right.
be surprised at the number of broadcasters who do that,
Yeah,
which I couldn't live with myself if I did that, and I know you couldn't
right.
either. Um, you know, since you're away from the game a little bit and been able to watch things with the 60,000 foot view, I really want to hear your thoughts about the NFLPA. As you know,
Hmm.
they've been going through a lot. They're operating now without an executive director who
Hmm.
resigned a few weeks ago as of the recording of this podcast. There's all sorts of things coming out. He was spending NFLPA money at Magic City. I mean, I wish I was making that up. I was like, I'm not just saying that for hyperbole. As you know, that was literally the
Right.
report,
Yeah.
right? And but far more dangerous, not trying to minimize that, is the fact that what has been revealed is that there was this agreement, this confidentiality agreement between the NFLPA and the NFL to basically conceal the fact that the owners were conspiring to restrict guaranteed contracts. And this to me is a story that should be huge because you have a players union that's actively cooperating with the NFL against the best interests of the player. Now you see the leadership is in shambles.
Yeah.
How can the NFLPA, how can they regain the trust of the players?
Oh, that's a good question. I think first of all, Jamel, we've got to have a former player as one of the as the head, right? I think a former player has to be that. Um, I know Don Davis well. I played with him. He's been at the PA for a long time. Dominique Foxworth, I'd throw his name in the hat.
Hmm.
He was the NFL the players PA president for a long time when I was in the league, and I played with him in Baltimore. Um, I'd love to see him as the head as heading the PA, but we need someone like that. We need someone that's not that doesn't have um, any buddy relationships with the NFL because that's working like you said that's working exactly against the player's best interest. Those conflicts of interest um, can't happen in a business like the NFL and the players union, right? So much has been happening. Like, can you imagine if that happened during uh the beginning of all the concussion lawsuits and all that? Like, I mean, but like you said, it's a big story that's not being discussed that much. And for the PA to really help build the trust back in the players and everyone, former players and current players and society in general, I think there's going to have to be just kind of exorcism of this of what's been happening and what the plan is moving forward, right? But there's no leadership right now, and the leadership has trust in leadership has crumbled. I think too many players feel that the union has become about protecting relationships with ownership than it has been about protecting the players and their bodies. And like I said, that conflict of interest is just that is non-negotiable. That cannot happen. That is a huge controversy for the PA.
Yeah, the director who resigned, Lloyd Howell, it came to light that he was part of an ownership group or had a relationship with an ownership group that was trying to buy into an NFL team. And if you're
Yeah,
leading the Players Association and while also trying to buy your way into the NFL, I mean, that's such an obvious conflict of interest. It's just like, how did that
yep,
even happen? How did
right,
somebody like that even
right,
get in in that position? But there's been
yeah,
this long time perception overall that the NFLPA is basically no match for the NFL. I mean,
right.
is that a fair is that a fair perception in your mind?
Well, the NFL obviously has a ton of money, and they have the money to hire the lawyers to, you know, look at different wording and paperwork and all these things that are afforded to high paid attorneys, right? But uh, players have the manpower, and one thing I'll never forget that was never really talked about was the mutiny that was about to happen in 2020 from the players when owners were contemplating forcing players to stand for the national anthem. And I heard from a number of high profile players from a number of several different teams that they were going to refuse to play if the owners did that. And the owners backed off because they were getting pressure from Trump. Trump was running his mouth every day about it, like he didn't have anything better to do but spill ketchup and spaghetti on his shirts and golf. But he they really took a major understanding of, okay, these guys mean business, right? And then when that video came out, I don't remember exactly when this was. This might have been 2020 or 2021. But when the players made that video and said that the NFL needed to do more, um, and this was right after the commissioner had uh had said something to that effect, but the players were like, no, 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 you need to do more. And they had all those high profile players on there, and then Roger came back out and basically said, he didn't mention Colin Kaepernick by name, but he essentially said the league hasn't been listening to its players and we want to do more. So the players have the power. They just have to, it's so many of us. It's 1,200, 13 of us, current players, right? Not me personally, but current players. There's, I think, 1,200 or something like that. And they if they understood the power that they really had, I think the collective bargaining agreements could be good. They could stop these owners from trying to get 18 games because that's their number one goal. That's been their number one goal since I was a rookie in 2002. Like force these owners to pay these doctor bills instead of 5 years. How about 15, 20 years after you're done playing, right? And I'm not just saying that as a former player, but like all these different things that players can push for and I don't think that the majority of them don't understand. Hell, I didn't understand when I was. There's much more information now, but I didn't understand really what I was voting on or anything. But a lot of the players, even today, they don't vote during the CBAs, Jamel. So you know that. So they've got to become more in tune. Like you said again, same thing with the college players to learn what's happening above their head. Because you may not care about it at the moment. You're in the NFL and you don't have to think about healthcare. You don't have to think about all that. But 5, 10, 15 years down the line, after you've retired, those things are going to become important to you, and it's going to be too late because the education of the NFL players hasn't been to a point where a majority of them need to understand that their vote is important and that they can really push the NFL, push the league to get more of what they want, not just during their careers but post careers as well.
Yeah, you mentioned a key piece of that. The owners want that 18th game, and so to me,
Yeah,
that gives
yeah,
the players actually a lot of leverage to work with.
right,
Do you think
right.
we'll ever see guaranteed contracts in the NFL, fully like across the board, like the NBA?
No, I don't think so, Jamel. And you asking me that question, I'll never forget. I had met a young PK Subban. I was living in Miami. I think this was, I don't know, it was 2013 or 2014. And a childhood friend of his lived in my building. And so I was at the restaurant at the hotel or at the residence, and he introduces me to PK. And I didn't know who he was, but I had heard of him, right? Like I knew he was like one of the few black players and he was a badass. And I had something to do that evening. I was going to dinner or something, but I canceled because I was just enamored with this kid and listening to him speaking. He was a kid at the time, right? I think he was only in the second year in the NFL or in the NHL. And I'm listening to him and I'm like, damn, this kid's got his head on straight. Like he understands. And when I told him, Jamel, that I don't know how we got on the subject, but I told him that NFL contracts weren't guaranteed. His jaw hit the floor and he thought I was joking. And he was like, what'd you say? And I was like, yeah, I said our contracts aren't guaranteed. And he was like, how is that possible? And so we had this conversation, right? And I couldn't imagine not playing without a guaranteed contract. And I felt a certain way because he was so appalled that we weren't getting guaranteed contracts. And I had normalized it, right?
Mm.
Because that's the system that I lived in and the system that I had forever seen. I was born in that system and it's still that same way. But so for me, it's been normalized. And he was so offended. He was like, I don't think I could ever play on a contract that wasn't guaranteed. And I'm like, that's a good point. I'm like, that's a good point. Like, But so to answer your question, if the owners want the 18 games, maybe the players should tell them that we want guaranteed contracts. If you want 18 games, we want guaranteed contracts. That's the non-negotiable, right? Like there's no need to negotiate with them. We know what they want. We know what they want. And so if you want 18 games, we want guaranteed contracts and some other stuff. We want some other stuff. We don't just want the ribs and the cornbread. We want some mac and cheese too. You know what I'm saying? Like we need to get all of that. And I really hope players understand the power that they have because they could do that. They could get better healthcare post career. Right now it's 5 years. 5 years after you're out of the NFL, if you're vested, right? That's only
Mm.
players who have played 3 years plus 3 games. So you're in your fourth year. After your third game you play, then you are vested finally. But only those players you after 5 years after the moment you retire, you get essentially NFL healthcare, right? You don't have to pay for any of it. But after that, you do. So players could get so much. I really hope they push and push and push and get those to get those extra rack of ribs, get that mac and cheese, get that cornbread, that potato salad, get all of it because they have the opportunity to do it, and I really hope they do.
Yeah, the unfortunate part, and where obviously ownership has a huge amount of leverage, is because
Yep.
they feel like, from a money standpoint, they can outlast you all. And when you have an average NFL career that's only like 3.5
Yep.
years, you have a
Yep.
lot of guys in the league who have their whole families dependent on them, and they just can't afford
Hmm.
to not make money. So eventually,
Hmm.
at some point, they're going to have to come back to the table. And, the owners,
Right.
much have they've done the last two CBAs, is like
Yeah.
they have they have taken it to the mat. So, um,
Right.
like you, I hope it happens one day because given the rate of injury, the danger of the job, it is unconscionable that they do
Right.
not have guaranteed contracts. All right. Before I let you go, Dante, I end every podcast by asking my guest a messy question. This is where we make the blogs. It's where we make the headlines. All right.
Yes.
So you alluded to your speed in this podcast. Maybe people don't know this, but your 40-yard dash time at the combine tied for second fastest of all time in combine history. Of course, that's what I'm talking about. All right, you in your prime running that 4.22 that you ran versus Tyreek Hill in his prime. Who wins?
See, Tyreek's speed was like my speed. He could go from 0 to 100 quick, right? Like that's why I ran such a fast 40 time. Now you put me in the 200, it's a little bit slower than my 40 time, but I could get out real fast at full speed. I watched the things that Tyreek's done. God, I feel like I had a similar speed, but his explosion is second to none. I haven't seen many people, but now here's the messy part of that question. In 2007, when I played with the Patriots, after I scored this long touchdown against the Cowboys, we were watching film that Monday in the meeting room, the receivers. Randy Moss walks up on me and stands over me like this, like and he was like, You think you fast?" He was like, "You ain't faster than me." And all I did was I looked up and I said, "Put something on it." Right. And he was like, 100 grand. He said, we'll both put 100 grand in the suitcase at the end of the finish line. And he was like, and I'm gonna pick my money up and you better not touch my money. And that was we were gonna race. We had a bye week coming up in a couple weeks, and that was we I was like, I got Randy. From 0 to 40, I got Randy. Now, you talking about 60, 80, 100? No, I'm not racing him because I already know what's going to happen. Those long legs are going to get to churning. But 0 to 40, I got you, Randy. and we never got to race because he copped out. He knows he copped out. He came up to me and he's like, "Man," he's like, "Word's getting around the building, and Belichick wouldn't be too happy if one of us got hurt." And I was like, "All right," I said, all right, Randy, okay." Even though I was like, I didn't feel like I dodged a bullet, but I was like, I had confidence, Jamel, but that's 100 grand on the line, and that would have been crazy. But yeah, as far as speed goes, I wish we would have been able to race. It would have been fun. It would have been something to brag about. Say I beat Randy Moss in the race, but I was blessed to play alongside guys like him and other players, and it was really a blessing. And I'm really blessed to be able to be in the position I'm in now, living in Washington D.C. with the connections and network that I have to be able to speak to people and meet people that are doing really great things around the world. It's really been a blessing.
So wait, you didn't answer the question though. You were Tyreek. I mean, don't think I didn't pick up on it. I was like, you didn't answer the question.
You know what? Honestly, in my day, I felt like no one could beat me.
All right.
But when I'm watching Tyreek now, I feel like he might have beat me by a hair. By a
Mm,
hair.
okay, by a hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, what's that speed looking like now?
Well, I'm a marathon runner now, or at least a half marathon runner now. So I'm a little more slow paced. I
Right?
can run longer, faster, or
Okay.
longer than I've been able to, but faster. I just do sprints on treadmill for a little fun, or like running up hills. But the speed, yeah, if even I try to think about running a 40, I might pull a hamstring. So I'm, I'm good. You've seen those videos, people racing they kids in the streets or their nieces and nephews. It won't be me. It won't be me.